Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, as I am always privileged to do so, I'm very proud and empowered and bolstered and energized. I stand on behalf of the good people of Engliston. And I do so to contribute to the debate of this on this resolution. And I want to begin by saying that I do believe that the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador has perfectly encapsulated our case. And so I will bring a very sort of narrow perspective to this argument. But before I do so, I too want to recognize the historic importance of this day. It is the anniversary of what has come to be known as Black Tuesday, where in this very chamber, looking very much like it still does to this day, there was a radical movement or moment where the mace, that instrument there, similar to that, went flying out the window to a crowd of people downstairs. It was an important moment in our history because it represented the first organized, significant political gathering and movement and momentum. And ironically, I heard today from Effie Walk. She was calling me in an unrelated matter. She called me today, and I said, I'm going to call your name in the parliament today. Effie Walks is almost 100. She was the only woman sitting in the council meeting of the Progressive Liberal Party at that time when there was, they were discussing what should happen in the House Assembly. In those days, there was an attempt to limit the voice of the opposition. It's interesting what we were hearing in here before we got earlier on whether we had 5 minutes or 30 minutes. But that was one of the issues, the limiting of speeches and the issue of boundaries being gerrymandered. And Effie Walks was one of the warriors in the room, the only woman at the time. And I want to pay tribute to her because she's still with us today. Her mind is fantastic. And she is just a courageous exemplar in this country. And, you know, when I think of Black Tuesday, it's something I feel very strongly about in terms of our history. I think we have to be very careful that we make a distinction between political distortions and history. I hear it a lot, and it really annoys me because foundationally we have the same history. You heard the member for Cat Island talk about Black Dick and poor Black Kate. Pompeii, we have a shared history. It is not in anyone's interest, even though you may think so, to create a distortion about whatever happened and why it happened. The role of the Progressive Liberal Party in history. It is what it is. Lyndon Pindling's role is what it is. What it is. A.D. Hanna's role is what it is. Milo Butler's role, it is what it is. Cecil Whitfield's role, you don't have to help me with my speech, my brother. Cecil Whitfield's role. In fact, you know, Cecil Whitfield was so radical, He had to be tamed. He had to be tamed. To be proud that he was part of our legacy. We don't distort it. And you know, I heard the member for Kalani, and I don't want to get too controversial, but I will say this. You talked about looking to see who get crown land. Well, when you do that, I want you to look at the history of land in this country because it speaks to how our people have become impoverished. I came across an article, a piece, a portion of the book of Dr. Gail Sanders and Creighton. And they talk about how land was utilized by the then United Bahamian Party. And you know what he says? He said, what they say, that these people, and I don't want to call no names, but they're part of our history. Some of them were knighted by the Queen. They were raised to honor in their exploitation of our people. But what they say, what in that book they say, that these people, the likes of them, and I'm quoting, had almost an unconscious ambition to take over the entire Bahamas, if only to divide it up again for sale and profit. The account of these historians, the ones I've just referred to, say that in their voracious quest for land acquisition that, and I'm quoting, he, and we're speaking of someone in particular, and his emulator, he's talking about H.G. Christie, took advantage not only of the demand as time went on, cleverly stimulated by advertising, but of immensely favorable local circumstances. Now, these were the favorable local circumstances: shortage of money, failure and hardship of traditional agriculture, the local farmers' ignorance of the value to others of their beachfront lands, muddled and tenuous titles, and an efficient, if not actually corrupt, Surveyor General's Department and Registry. This is what Dr. Gail Saunders and Creighton are saying about it. Over the years, Bahamian realtors built up a veritable land bank of properties. Some bought at windfall prices, but most being items on which options and agency agreements were held. So this is, when the Prime Minister, as the Minister responsible for land, wants to look at the history of land in this country, I pray it will not be the product of a political distortion, but an actual analysis of the history of our people, why we are where we are. And so today I celebrate this day because it's an important day in the history of our people. It's one of the noble days. But ironically, it was marked by radical action, because that makes right there went out the window. And today you might say, oh no! But in those days, oh yeah, that's how we've gotten rid of the oh no phase of life, but I ain't there. At that time, a radical action was taken, and within 24 months, we had a political change for the first time. And of course, this came after the 1962 general election, where the boundaries had been gerrymandered, and where the Family Islands had more seats than New Providence, where the bulk of the population was, where women voted for the first time, where the PLP got more votes than the FNM. UBP, sorry. Let me don't make that mistake. That's a Freudian slip. Freudian slip. The PLP had more votes than the UBP and ended up with less seats than they had going into the general elections. So, this was an important moment in our history, and we mustn't be afraid of it. We mustn't bury it. We must hold it up and celebrate it. You know why? Because it represents the best of who we are, because it represents the fight of an oppressed people for freedom. And so, Mr. Speaker, today, as I stand in this house, all these years later, 55 years later, here we are in this country facing very hard times. The people of Engliston know firsthand that the struggle is real. I contribute on their behalf in this house to tell the government, in case you don't know, the nature of their plight. Many of them have been sent home from places of employment or were self-employed until the state of emergency. They've now been for many weeks without income, not a penny. For many of them, their savings were non-existent because they were working on minimum wage from paycheck to paycheck. And even for those of them who had some savings stored away, they are being rapidly depleted day by day, week by week. They're worried about their inability to pay rent. And we heard the rent plan, and I'm still trying to analyze it, because it seems to me that based on that plan, once you qualify, you're still liable for 60%. And if you can't pay that, what is going to be the outcome? What is going to be the result of those people? And so they've been many weeks, as I've indicated, without income. They've lived paycheck to paycheck. They're worried about their inability to pay rent, and they're going to be worried about having to pay the 60% because they don't have it. It's the reality, don't have it. And the prospect of ending up on the streets. And the landlords themselves are stressed, to be fair. I spoke to one the other day. He told me that his rent includes cable, water, and electricity in his name. And he ain't getting $1. And so even they themselves are worried. This is a difficult problem, I understand it, but I'm not sure that what has been articulated today deals with it. And it's complex. All of this is having a negative impact on the existence of people. And then in the face of this pandemic, we see exposed, and I gotta talk about this, the slum landlords who climb down from their lofty places of wealth and comfort to go into communities like the one I represent, to demand rents from tenants living in substandard housing places, many of which are unfit for human habitation. We should be talking about that in this rent thing right now. Or we're in the midst of continuous admonition by the Ministry of Health to wash your hands, to stop transmission of this deadly virus. There's no running water. I went just last week to a particular location off Wolf Road, apartment rental units with multiple units. No running water. None servicing any of the units. And there were many children housed in that unit. As we seek to fight off this growing epidemic, the Minister of Social Services don't defend it. Let's look at it and find solutions. Don't say it just happened. We're talking about a pandemic where you're telling people to wash their hands and there's no water. And I'm saying that in the context of the rent, we must look at all of these issues. And the Minister of Social Services should be the advocate, not a political defender. Advocate for rent reform, for housing reform in this country. And I have spoken, no, I don't know if it's a new building. It might be a new landlord. But I mean, you should inquire, because your mandate as Minister of Social Services is to protect the most vulnerable in our country. Thank you, Speaker. No, it's not about detention. Do not challenge me on this issue. We should be on the same page. Thank you. Thank you. And so when we talk about this is an issue that I have been speaking about in this Parliament for years. We need to have the courage to address reform as it relates to rental units in this country. We can close our eyes and pretend it don't exist all we want, but I'm telling you, in this pandemic, where we're saying wash your hands, there are many people living in rental units that this provision we heard about today speaks to, that cannot wash hands because there is no water there. They have to make their way to a pump, and that's very onerous when what is required is constant washing of hands. Yes. And so, Mr. Speaker, I hear the politicians in here, this is why the Haitian people got to wake up, Everyone here, oh, you was there. Listen, there's an issue that's on the table. There's an issue that's on the table. And the Bahamian people know what they are subject to. And we will know, the politicians in here, they will know who the patriots are and who the politicians are, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, many of the people of Angliston are still waiting for the Department of Social Services to respond to their online applications for help. I know it's a lot. There's thousands of people, but the situation is urgent. They're waiting for help to their online request to the National Insurance Board, and I believe the minister, the member for Garden Hill, to be next, and he will speak to that. But they're waiting to provide financial assistance. So, Speaker, this is a fact. Many people today are unable to feed their children and are unable to and face daily that their children are at risk. They daily fear that their children's education and developmental well-being are falling between the cracks. I've spoken about this before. We have homes that have no computers. We are a developing nation. They have no computers. They have no Wi-Fi. And I have seen children who have been for the last 6 weeks, no exposure to nothing. Little boys wandering around. Speaker, some don't even have electricity. This is just a reality. And I'm saying this because I think we have to sensitize ourselves to what is actually happening on the ground in this country. There are today in this country children who have had, and I've said, no institutional or educational instruction going on now for 2 months. And I don't know how this will impact their future prospects. It might not, but then it might. Many in the community are worried about their vulnerable loved ones, their elderly family members, their disabled relatives. I'm not speaking secondhand, I'm telling you what I'm seeing. Many people are hurting and are hungry. I didn't think I'd ever come in this parliament and say people hungry. And someone finds it funny in the back here. Speaker, we are facing a crisis of hunger. We've seen the long lines of those seeking help to eat. We saw it, and I don't want to say where, we've seen the long lines. Just a few days ago, a mother came to me, holding her baby in her arms, pleading for me to look in her plastic bag, containing only an empty container of baby formula. The look in her eyes defy words, but communicate a desperation and hopelessness I have never seen. I am seeing hunger in the eyes of young men. I ain't never seen these things before, which depict an emptiness which is unbearable to see. We are debating here another extension of the curfew and shutdown for another 30 days. Do we understand what this means for poor people in this country? In the recent 5-day shutdown, I got calls and I couldn't move, and we had to mobilize. Members of the community coordinated to provide emergency food relief for a young mother. On another occasion, to a young man and his mother. And I am certain there were many others who we could not even help. We cannot continue these strategies designed to stop the spread of coronavirus without addressing the growing epidemic of hunger in this country, in New Providence in particular. And today, on their behalf, I call upon the government. I heard the member for the Minister of Agriculture, with Pine, Marco City, the Minister of Agriculture. All of them noble and admirable objectives, but we have a current, present, and immediate crisis on our hands. Clear and present. Today on their behalf, I call upon the government to immediately, I heard the Prime Minister talk about he's going to get the jitneys and taxis and all that. Listen, the digital thing, we need immediate relief to be forthwith delivered and assistance rendered to the many people who, as we speak, are suffering greatly through no fault of their own, and largely as a result of policies which have left them in the lurch. We shut down businesses. I'm not commenting on whether they were correct or not, but we cannot dismiss that people were sent home without, and they don't have a dollar. We cannot, and I say this, and I believe this is our position, we cannot entertain longer periods of isolation until and unless it is accompanied by an aggression and by aggressive and overdue proactivity, providing access to food in particular. This is now a crisis, and a formula must be devised to address the uncertainty associated with rental housing, because this is causing people to be sick. The government must be seen to be focused and resolute in addressing these matters. We have seen it in other countries, so we know that where there is a will, there is a way. So today, Mr. Speaker, I speak as a matter of utmost urgency to the plight of thousands of Bahamians who look to their government to provide a safety net to the risks they face because of policies taken in the public interest. There must be balance to achieve public health objectives, but to hold it together for people. We cannot pretend to ignore this critical dilemma. So today, I place it bare on the floor of this House. People are hungry. And as an absolute first priority, this must be addressed. We cannot ignore or pretend that in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic, there is not at the same time a growing phenomenon of hunger, and it is reaching crisis levels and epic proportions. I went right to, let me just Google this. This is not unique to the Bahamas. This is being seen throughout in many other places where the coronavirus is having its effect. And this is an article, I think it's in the New York Times, And I just read through it quickly. I could lay it, but I'm adopting it. It says the United Nations warns of a hunger pandemic amid threats of coronavirus and an economic downturn. And it goes on to say, while the world grapples with the coronavirus pandemic, the head of the United Nations Food Agency warned on Tuesday, and this was April 22nd, that a looming hunger pandemic will bring the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. And it goes on further to say, as a result of the coronavirus outbreak and the subsequent economic ramifications, the food agency, this must be FAO, found an additional 130 million people could be on the brink of starvation by the end of the year. The working poor would be hit the hardest as a result of the decline in tourism and exports. Children are particularly at risk as lockdowns in response to the coronavirus are keeping them out of school where they typically could receive subsidized meals. And I know that in the Bahamas, we have been proactive with that in terms of providing the lunch vouchers for children who are themselves on the lunch program. But it tells you that this is a serious issue, and any of us who represent communities like the one I do, or even other communities, will admit, if they are honest, that people are facing issues of hunger in this country right now as we speak, and they're particularly at risk in lockdowns. So I am calling on the government. I understand the nice plans you have, but we need immediate intervention. If you lock down on Friday, by Friday, I'm going to quote, you know what Barbados did? When they went into their shutdown, they delivered 3,000 food packages to who they knew were vulnerable households. You cannot lock people down. They don't have a dollar. It's beyond belief. We have to find a way to step in. And so I'm Prime Minister, I am calling on you to ensure that by the time we go into a lockdown on Friday, that some strategy is devised. And I don't know what it is in such short time, but we have to find a solution. We cannot entertain longer periods of isolation until we find solutions. The government must be seen to be focused and resolute in addressing these matters. We've seen it in other countries. They said they did in Barbados and other countries. Where there is a will, there is a way. Today I speak as a matter of utmost urgency to the plight of thousands of Bahamians who look to their government to provide a safety net to the risks they face. People are hungry. And they are asking today, the competent authority, where is the heart? And the Prime Minister asked this question, but this is what the people are saying. Where is the heart? Is there a soul? Can their cries be heard? In Angleton, we are doing our best to counter this. We've provided in the last few weeks hundreds of hot meals throughout a community program from a community center. And there are many NGOs, not related to me, connected to me, who are also in Angleton. One of them was my opponent. We had a very good discussion in the last election. And they're in there providing, rendering assistance on the ground. But the scope and immensity of this crisis demands the intervention of government. This is the only way we will put an end to transmission, believe it or not. Even though at the core of this crisis is the disease, which continues, it appears to evidence exponential growth. And I was very interested to see what the government says about what's happening and what the leader of the opposition said by reference to the academic study at the University of Bahamas, it causes some concern. And it may be related to the CNCDs, the chronic non-communicable diseases. The chicks are coming home to roost. Our hospitals are strained. These are institutional weaknesses that are being brought to the fore, and they're historic. And it speaks to all of us. But we must find a way to simultaneously, while we're looking at the core disease, simultaneously create multifaceted, related challenges cannot be ignored or overlooked. Multifaceted responses, and which requires equally intensive responses. The COVID-19 dashboard speaks to the amount, who's been diagnosed, who's died, et cetera, but it does not, we don't know what the statistics are of human suffering due to lack of food. I know what I've seen. It ain't scientific, but it's a problem. It's a serious problem right now. There is no doubt, and I want to say this, that there have been many missteps have occurred, and there's been, in my view, misguided policy decisions. I found it interesting, the member for Bamboo Town spoke about the road traffic department, because it boggled my mind that you spoke about social distancing, and then you tell everyone you gotta come pay light bill and go to road traffic at the end of the month. And you end up with thousands of people piling up on each other, and it's almost as if sometimes it looks as if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And so I wanted to urge that there be a coordinated approach. You need social distancing, okay? So you don't need to tell people go line up to pay no light bill. I know we've reversed that. The alphabetical thing in shopping. I said to the Prime Minister, we were here last time, I urged him to rethink that. Yes, he did. But before he did, we had absolute chaos, and all of these are not desirable circumstances for social distancing. So I only raise it because I am encouraging that the competent authority signal to the Bahamian people that there is a comprehensive, integrated plan that is rational and consistent with the fundamental premise that while we are dealing with person-to-person disease transmission, you got to establish that principle. You can't come all over the place with that. However, but at the same time, we must put front and center the well-being of each person. We cannot just say that people are potential transmitters, and you must do this, you must do that. We must remember that the potential transmitter is a whole human, and you have to look at the entirety of that individual, particularly when you're asking them not to be transmitters. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say, my 2 minutes and 10 seconds, we support our government. The member for Care Island said that. We support our public servants. When you go, they're there with us, and when we go, they're there with you. We support our healthcare workers. We support the police and defense force officers. We support the supplies officers. We support the sanitation workers. While we are locked down and locked in or under curfew, they are working and keeping the wheels turning. I'm very proud of them. And that is why we have to, and the member for Care Island raised this point, we have to prioritize our healthcare workers. We have to ensure that they are properly equipped. They should want for nothing, because I don't want their job. They are on the front line of risk. And we have to ensure that they are properly, absolutely equipped and protected. And so, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of, and I'm accelerating now, on the issue of the students or the people who are stuck, I give you two cases. One is a woman who went over with her mother for a diagnostic test. She was diagnosed with cancer. Her mother died over there. They're stuck over there with their mother's dead body. They won't come home. This is urgent. Don't think too long. Get them home. There's a student from Montel Heights. He went over to do his pharmaceutical exams in Arkansas. He's so resilient. He made his way down to Florida. I don't know how he did it. But he's stuck there. He's living with an aunt who ain't working. He's catching hell. Let them come home. Find a place. I mean, if you need some help, I can help point you in some places. Let's get these Bahamians home. Other countries have brought their people. They're here 6 weeks later advocating for Bahamians to come home. Let them come home. Let the Bahamians come home. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to end by saying that our position is that we are asking the government, because of the issues and the risk factors and the fact that what you're indicating is not necessarily what other academics are saying about how we're performing, that we, instead of doing the 30 days, that we do 14 days, let us come back here as a parliamentary body and let us look at where we are. And you want us to give you a blank check on an issue such as this. So we're asking for 14 days, not the 30. We might go with the 30. We've agreed with everything you've done thus far, but we're asking in this case 14 days. And I end by saying, finally, Mr. Speaker, to the people of Angleton, I say to them, I will stand with them all the way. All the way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.